In Bill Gates' watershed book, How to Prevent a Climate Disaster, he states that global emissions are at 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide. And the industry I'm going to be talking to you about makes up 10% of that number, or 5 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year into the atmosphere. This industry, you may be familiar with it, actually will be familiar with it, because the largest retailer in this case has 21,000 stores in 92 territories across the world. Yes, this industry is fast fashion, and it's got its start in the Industrial Revolution. During this revolution, machine power replaced human power as the main source of power for the manufacture of goods and services. And this industry really got its start in the Industrial Revolution, when machine power replaced manpower for manufacturing goods. And this machine power was consolidated into a set of workhouses, or factories as we know them today. This made clothes much more efficient to manufacture and much cheaper. But fast fashion only got its start in 1975, when it finally got off the ground with a small retailer in a corner of a street in a small city in Galicia. This was run by a man called Amancio Ortega, and it grew to become the massive fashion conglomerate that we know today as Inditex or Zara. Ortega pursued a unique way of looking at fashion. He pursued what he called instant fashion, to reduce and to minimize the lead time between the designer and the store. In his model, he would get the designer to design a collection of clothing and then immediately outsource the production to other factories in Asia. This outsourcing led to Zara being able to manage a massive number of collections each year, 20 of them in fact per year, which means one new collection every 2 weeks. And these designs of clothes would keep coming and going, and that created an urgency mindset in the consumer. You have to buy the piece of clothing that you want now, otherwise it's going to be gone the next time you come. And the other aspect of his model was value for money clothing, clothing that would last an extremely long time, clothing that was very cheap, and clothing that, most importantly, looked good. But all of this came at a cost. The World Economic Forum ranked the fast fashion industry third on the list of its big 8 producers. Third. And it accounts for 10% of the world's emissions. The environmental impact from fast fashion can be divided into 3 categories: that from manufacturing, that from usage, and from disposal. Now, the manufacturing part of the fast fashion environmental impact is by far one of the biggest parts. According to a study by the International Trade Commission, a subsidiary of the UN, it accounted for up to 28% of all emissions released during the life cycle of an item of fast fashion. And this primarily came from the manufacture of polyester. Polyester is a petroleum-derived fabric, and it is extremely durable, extremely unreactive. It doesn't corrode, it doesn't shrink, it doesn't have many of the negative impacts that pure cotton does. But it comes at a cost. Each barrel of oil extracted from an offshore rig emits about 14 kilograms of carbon dioxide. And the polyester industry, most of which is used for fast fashion, uses 70 million barrels of this stuff every year. That's, for those of you who are fast at math, 1 billion tons or more of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere each year, just from the extraction of oil, to produce some of the fabric necessary to produce the clothes that are produced by the fast fashion industry. And then on top of this, we add the environmental impact of producing cotton. Cotton has a long history. It's been produced since the 19th century. And the process used to treat and to manufacture cotton has changed drastically. It has included new chemicals, new types of fertilizer. However, it's also gotten much more emissions intensive. Cotton emits less volume of greenhouse gases compared with the extraction of a similar amount of oil. However, the form of this emission is much more harmful than that of the fossil fuels. In this case, nitrogenized fertilizer is used in the production of cotton, and cotton accounts for 14% of emissions of all greenhouse gases and 52% of nitrous oxide. Now, just to give you an idea of just how much more powerful nitrous oxide is in causing the greenhouse effect that warms our planet, scientists have placed this value at 210 times. That means one molecule of nitrous oxide is equivalent to 210 molecules of carbon dioxide. This massive environmental impact can be added on further in the manufacturing of these goods. The actual manufacture of the goods from the raw material, which is polyester and cotton, and some other less significant materials, into the finished garment. And this again uses natural gas, or methane as we know it. And they usually use this to preheat the cotton and the polyester in order to better shape it into this garment of clothing. However, this also emits carbon dioxide because the methane is obviously being burned. But there are further emissions. The emissions don't just stop there after the clothes have been sold. There is the use phase, which accounts for 32% of the carbon dioxide emissions and the greenhouse gas emissions that are created in the life cycle of a piece of fast fashion. These emissions primarily stem from the generation of electricity, the treatment of water, and the heating of water necessary to run a washing machine, as well as the heating of air necessary to run a dryer. On top of this, there is disposal. Still, I know it feels like the carbon dioxide emissions are building up, but this is just the scale of the problem that we are facing today. Disposal has other impacts on the environment, such as the release of chemicals into the water table if the item of clothing has been landfilled. And it produces other environmental impacts, as well as releasing methane from the decay of the cotton. Polyester, however, never breaks down. It gets degraded into tiny little microplastics that are released into the environment, into the ecosystem, are consumed by fish, and then are consumed by humans. We do not know exactly what the impact of these microplastics are on our health. Scientists have not managed to figure out much about these elusive pieces of material. So, what are the solutions to this massive problem? Well, the first course of action is to find an alternative for polyester. Polyester emits a large proportion of the carbon emissions from the manufacture of fast fashion. We need to find greener and better alternatives for polyester, and this can only be accomplished through concerted and sustained research. The second course of action is the electrification of the manufacture process and the electrification of hot water. In some places of the world, for example, Russia, hot water is created centrally in a central plant, and natural gas is used in this creation. We need to electrify these processes so that our hot water production is more eco-friendly, and we need to produce more renewable energy so that we do not simply transfer the carbon dioxide emissions from the heating plant to the power plant. And this also helps solve the use case problem, which is usually from the heating of water for the washing of these clothes. And the final solution is to recycle. This solves our waste problem. Our waste problem can be solved by recycling, and it also solves our material problem because the recycled materials can be used again in the production of new clothes, and again in the production of new clothes, and so on and so forth. But these solutions take time. And what can we do in the meantime? What can we as people do in the meantime? Well, it may seem, due to the scale of this problem, that it is impossible for any one of us to take any course of action that will reduce the impact of the environment, even a little bit. But this is untrue. The average consumer buys 61 pieces of fast fashion a month. This incredible number can be reduced, and I find it hard to believe that any one of us could need 61 pieces of clothing a month. That's like having 2 new pieces of clothing every single day. And if we were to cut down on this number, then we would also significantly reduce the carbon dioxide emissions coming from the fast fashion industry. The second course of action is to consider alternatives. Now, I'm sure, as many of us know, fast fashion makes us look good. But the thing is that we also have other alternatives, like renting of clothing. Renting is much more eco-friendly because obviously you're producing very few clothing, and they're being used by many more people. And while it may seem that these actions are cliche and very repetitive, and everybody suggested them already, but the thing is that these actions do make a difference. Your actions make a difference. And I ask you today to make your positive impact on the environment and help us solve the ecological disaster and avert society from a collapse. Thank you.